Hi everybody, welcome to another table talk. So I'm just back from the field flying, and I shot a couple of videos. One with this airplane testing a new three-blade prop on 4S. And I started to notice during that flight that I was having a bit of a problem with elevon flutter. And what is elevon flutter? Well, it's like a vibration. Essentially, if this is my elevon, it will start to kind of do this in the air. And I mean, when it gets really extreme, it can cause you to lose control of your plane. It can tear off the elevon, but it also, it slows you down and indicates that there's probably something a little bit wrong with your plane. Maybe going too fast. That's possible. Obviously, I was going pretty fast. It's the first time that I've started to notice it on this plane. I did have it happen years ago. On a MiG-29, RC Power's MiG-29 version 3 that I was trying to get to go really fast with 4S, on a 4S setup with a big honking motor and that sort of stuff. So, pardon me, I wanted to talk about some things that can cause elevon flutter that you can prevent through good build techniques. And then what I may do to sort mine out. So in the video, which I'll have linked down below, I pointed out that I've got quite a bit of left trim in this airplane now, and of course because I have these booms, I guess, so to speak, here for the scale. Look, that sort of extends it out. These are a bit flexible, but I could see when the plane was going by and going away from me, I could see that my elevons were doing this. So anyway, I've had a good look at it, and I think part of my problem, in addition to the fact that I've got so much trim, I think part of what is happening is, especially with a prop and slot airplane, as you get going really, really fast, of course you have just the airflow going over the plane, but then you also have considerable amount of prop wash, which can be quite turbulent, coming off of the prop and then hitting the elevons. And of course the elevons, more so than the rudders, the elevons get a lot more use when you're flying. So I think part of the problem was perhaps the prop wash, and the force was trying to force these things together, and maybe the servo was fighting back a little bit. I'm not sure. But I think part of my problem is I noticed, and hopefully you'll be able to see, I noticed on this particular elevon here that there's, is it that one? Yeah, this one is actually quite solid. I don't have really any play in this one at all. It's the linkage between my servo and my control horn is good and solid. I don't have any issues with my hinges, which I'm going to talk about here shortly. But what I think I've got going on is in this particular elevon, just when I move it gently, I'm seeing 2 or 3 millimeters of movement there. And I know it's going to be hard for you to see, but sometime over time when I've adjusted it, the clevis on my control horn is actually sort of angled like that. So I think probably what's happened is over time, I now have, I think, 530 flights on this plane. So it's, we're getting pretty extreme here on how many flights I've had on this thing, and God knows how many hundreds of thousands of times these, these elevons have moved. And I think because the little nylon pin is at an angle, that it's worn this hole a little bit too big. So a couple of things that I might think about doing with this plane is I may try and set up more sub-trim in my ailerons to try and keep the plane from rolling to the right, because obviously I haven't taken it very easy on this plane. I've punished it pretty hard over 500 plus flights. So what I'm suspecting is that somehow, somewhere, I've got a little bit of a warp or a bend going on that I can't really see with my naked eye, but it's causing me to have more left trim than I did, 100 or so or more flights ago. So yeah, so that could be causing me a bit of a problem. The other thing that I'm probably going to do is, I'll take this, disconnect this push rod and figure out a way. I have in the past, when I've had really loose connections here between my push rod and my control horn, is put a little bit of epoxy, fill the hole up with some epoxy, let it cure really, really hard, like overnight, and then just very gently re-drill the hole so that now I have a snug fit again, and see how that goes. Okay, so things that you want to be cautious of, when you are building your plane, if you do want to obviously prevent elevon flutter, touch wood. The RC gods have been very good to me, and the two different planes I've had elevon flutter, I've been able to chop the power and slow it down. I did, after I had the problem on 4S, I put this prop on, which is the fastest prop on 3S, and I'm not seeing any elevon flutter whatsoever. So there's just a certain amount of thrust and a certain speed range where that it's bringing that elevon flutter on. And even at times in that video, I wasn't noticing it, but then every once in a while, and I think I mentioned when I was going around in the corner, the first high-speed turn, I could actually hear this sort of, I know that's terrible sound effects, I apologize, but at first I thought it was a problem with the prop, and then I came to realize that it was my elevon fluttering that was causing that, and it wasn't causing the plane to be uncontrollable, but I'm sure it probably slowed it down a little bit. Okay, so if you're building a park jet, and especially if you're thinking about putting a fairly powerful speedy motor on it, some things that you really want to consider are how stiff the foam is in your elevons. I mean, I'm using Depron, and these are fairly small. So if you have fairly large control surfaces with a softer foam, like maybe an MPF model plane foam, you might want to consider reinforcing those with a little section of carbon tube or bamboo skewer or whatever, because you don't want any sort of flex just in the foam itself. The other thing is, I've found when I had the elevon flutter in my MiG-29 version 3, it was before I started using this. I put, actually on my elevons, I put tape, my hinge tape on the top, and then I also put it on the bottom. Hopefully you'll be able to see there. I put it on the bottom, and right down into the where I've cut the bevel. I have a video that'll be linked down below on how I make my hinges, and I show how I put that second bit of insurance tape on there, and that really helps keep my elevon secure. So yeah, sometimes it could be a problem with the fact that the hinge is not good and secure. Once you've figured out whether the actual material you've made your elevons out of is stiff enough. And then, like I said, the other issue you might have some issue in your linkages. Like maybe you've got some play up here at your servo for some reason. Especially if you're using like a quick connect like I am. And then, like I have in this situation here, I think I've got a situation where the little hole in the control horn has worn to the point where I don't have a tight enough tolerance around my the clevis, the little pin on the clevis. So I mean, obviously I could just fly it on 3S forever and ever, but so eventually I'll get around to that. So yeah, so those are three kind of, I think, sort of the three or maybe four main things. Be careful how big a power system you put on, especially if you've got bigger control surfaces in the back, and the foam might be a little bit flexible. So consider, possibly if you're really wanting to get the plane going fast, putting some reinforcement in your elevons. If the foam is a little bit soft, like maybe model plane foam, something like that. Make sure your hinges are really good and solid, good and snug. That there's no play in those. If you take the surface and move it back and forth, this way, the length of the airplane, if you've got some play in there, as the plane gets going faster with more prop wash on it, it's going to cause issues. And then also check the linkages, right from your servo arm down to the control horn to make sure that you're not you don't have any problems. The other thing is, if you're using, depending on what kind of material you're making your control horn, your push rods out of, you know, if it's really flexible, like some kind of flexible wire or something like that, that could also be contributing. So you may need to figure out a way, either use a material to make stiffer push rods, or, you know, run some guides so that there's not going to be any play at all in your push rods. So there we go, folks. There's kind of my my experience, my tips, lessons learned on elevon flutter. Obviously, I was very lucky today, but I have seen on planes where it can get very, very out of control and cause you to lose control of the plane. Either the the plane just goes out of control, or the elevon comes off completely, and then even if you still have a certain amount of control over the plane, it can be very, very difficult to get it back on the ground. So yeah, so there you go, folks. Thanks as always for watching. Please check out the video description down below for more info, and like a couple of those videos that I mentioned, the video of this one flying when I had the problem, as well as how I make my hinges. So blue skies, calm winds to everyone, park jet noise, hear the sound of freedom, baby. Take care.